2003 was a very memorable year for video games. Silent Hill 3, Madden 04 were the most overpowered player of all time, Michael Vick on the cover, The Simpsons Hit and Run, Tony Hawk Underground, SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom, Need for Speed Underground, True Crime Streets of LA, and then of course, SmackDown Here Comes the Pain. SmackDown Here Comes the Pain easily stands out as the top action game from the year. THQ poured their all in making the SmackDown series a successful franchise, and Here Comes the Pain only did more to cement that status. SmackDown Here Comes the Pain to this very day is widely considered to be the greatest wrestling game for many reasons. It felt like the culmination of 5 years work in the series. Somewhat similar to how 2K19 is regarded positively. It's because 2K14 and 18 was a slow evolution to get what was WWE 2K19, and that's what it was with Here Comes the Pain. Each game, barring the boring charisma, let's just bring it, topped the other, and in some ways, that game did have some stuff better than Know Your Role. So what's next? The thing is, 2003 saw a bunch of video game series reach their peak. Tony Hawk Underground and Madden 04 come to mind. Here Comes the Pain to some is another. With 2004 coming up, THQ was slowly preparing the next installment in the series. As always, fans speculated on the possible inclusions to the game. Of course, fans also mentioned the potential names of the game. SmackDown is True, SmackDown You're Next, and of course the one that many thought was the next title, SmackDown World Life. This made sense as John Cena was one of the hottest rising stars in WWE at the time. That never materialized, though everyone started to call it SmackDown World Life. They thought it was a foregone conclusion. But then on April 15, 2004, THQ confirmed that the next game was not going to be called SmackDown World Life. Instead, it was announced as SmackDown vs. Raw on May 3rd. THQ were very silent about the game throughout May, and compared to other years, there was a lot of info about the next installment. It wasn't until June, though, that you started hearing about SmackDown vs. Raw. A teaser with Randy Orton and John Cena was released, and the graphics looked improved. The graphics took a step in the right direction, and perhaps the most improved area of SmackDown vs. Raw was definitely presentation. Commentary was back and better than ever, and the game looked extremely promising. It really felt like the beginning of a new era for WWE games. Presentation was taken to the next level. Over the next couple of months, a plethora of information was revealed about the game, and when the game did release, fans felt something was missing, especially from Here Comes the Pain, a game which essentially gave the WWE games an almost untouchable peak. But that's what hurt SmackDown vs. Raw the most. If you do not look at the previous title and treat it as its own game, I personally think it has its place because this game did a whole lot for the series. Stuff that's felt to this very day, and low-key, the influence SmackDown vs. Raw had on the entire series was greater than that of Here Comes the Pain. So let's talk about the gameplay first. Right out of the gate, playing the game, it's very similar to Here Comes the Pain. At face value, it feels like almost the same game. Fast-paced action, just a little slower. The action that we're used to from Shut Your Mouth and Here Comes the Pain was still there. So what's the difference? Well, a lot of things changed. For one, when the match began, you have a stare down, the option to strike your opponent, or a test of strength. These things were decent additions to the game. Then you have the chops in the corner. To top it all off, the submission system was even better. You can get yourself disqualified holding until 5, but perhaps the biggest difference in the gameplay was the inclusion of heel and face. The reason why this was a huge difference comes down to the fact that the way you wrestled gave you the opportunity to increase your clean or dirty meter. The game rewards you for wrestling clean, climbing up to the top rope, taunting, never using the rope bump tactic, or rewards you as a heel knocking down the referee and using weapons. The influence the clean and dirty element had was very high. It let you play games like never before. Was it that big of a deal? I don't think so, but it was a nice addition and allowed for more variety in the games. Of course, another addition was commentary. The detail in that area was like never before. Almost everybody had commentary lines in this game, and it gave more life. Because as good as Here Comes the Pain was, there was no commentary, and some people liked that. The commentary, though, gets boring after a while, of course, because it's a WWE game, and you can't have a good thing in the commentary area, but it is what it is. For new match additions, there was only one. Let's just say that it was the most disappointing. Backstage Raw. Why was it so disappointing? Because the SmackDown series always had connected backstage areas. You can play in the parking lot, locker room, then go out and drop your opponent in the ring. But they removed that here. Why? Because I don't see a valid reason, because the hardcore matches were incredible in the early games. Is it going to make you say, damn, I ain't buying this? No, but taking it away was unnecessary, because even if they wanted the games to be realistic, there's some matches that make their way to the parking lot or backstage. Overall, the gameplay of SmackDown vs. Raw was solid. Hell, even good, but compared to the previous games, something was off about it. I think this had to do with THQ wanting a realistic game, but can't let go of the arcade gameplay yet. So it was a situation which showed where the series was heading. SmackDown vs. Raw 2006 had a clear identity when compared to SmackDown vs. Raw. But there was a lot of great additions to SmackDown vs. Raw. One of them was the soundtrack. Beforehand, the games were filled with generic early 2000s fast-paced music, but since THQ wanted to treat the games like a big deal, they added a soundtrack. And to say this was a welcoming addition would be a massive, massive understatement. You turn on the PS2, trailer plays, and boom, when worlds collide. Then Firefly by Breaking Benjamin, and it was a soundtrack of variety and makes you remember the games more fondly. My personal favorite was Firefly, as I feel it truly represented this game. Like whenever I think of SVR, I always think of Firefly first. The amount of time spent at menu was almost second to none. Maybe 06, but definitely second to 07. As a soundtrack, it ranks very high for WWE games, no doubt about it. It was top 5. Now, once again, a step backwards comes in the roster area. This one is a bit positive and a bit negative. So let's talk about the negative first. The negative has to do with the fact that there was only 3 new additions on the Raw and SmackDown roster. Of course, Chuck Palumbo and Molly Holly technically count, but they were in Shut Your Mouth. The new additions were Garrison Cade, Mark Jindrak, and Rene Dupree. The roster gives off an April or May 2004 vibe. Molly's wearing a wig. John Cena had his World Life wristbands, which I believe he debuted in March. JBL was in the game, so if they had to, they would update certain wrestlers, you know. Obviously, there's a cutoff point, but some wrestlers, they managed to get him in there. They managed to look up to date. Randy Orton even has his Burn in My Light entrance music. Shelton Benjamin used to sport a singlet, but after moving to Raw, he began wearing trunks, and that change was reflected in the game. Of course, these changes weren't for everyone. Chris Jericho looked like the most outdated wrestler in the entire game, despite his obvious change in real life. If you had no knowledge of WWE storylines, you would not realize Y2J was a face. He still has that ponytail from 2003, the purple tights, and even trashes the fans during his entrance. Out of the top guys, he's one of my least favorite look-wise because of the lack of change. Look doesn't fit that time period. You had the notable additions in the roster, but as always, there's some strange omissions. Lita is the most glaring, the most obvious of them all. Her not being featured in the game is extremely odd because she was on TV the entire time. Hell, her storyline was one of the biggest at the time as well. But WWE games during the 2000s always had that one odd omission. Stone Cold wasn't in it because he couldn't come to a deal with WWE in April of 2004. I'm pretty sure it was initially set to be in the game, but they removed them completely. The Basham's call name were found in the game files, but not much else. Then, of course, there's Rikishi, who was actually revealed to be in the game during the build-up, but after his release in July 2004, they removed him. But then there was Brock Lesnar. Lesnar, of course, was set to leave WWE after WrestleMania. His files, such as renders, were in the public beta game from August of 2004, so if he remained just a while later, maybe he would have been in the game. Other removed characters had movesets in the public beta, such as Ricky Steamboat, Cactus Jack, and British Bulldog even had a full model in-game. So at the end of the day, we missed out on some stuff. The roster compared to Here Comes the Pain was somewhat outdated. What I mean by that is that Here Comes the Pain's cutoff date was June of 2003, I believe. They even had Ultimo Dragon in the game. Here, Eugene, Mordecai, Kenzo Suzuki weren't featured. Then you had the likes of Hurricane, Billy Kidman, Billy Gunn, and Paul London who weren't in the game. It's not like a damn I won't buy type thing, but it's always cool to have more wrestlers in the roster, and that's where the Legends came in. This is where they carried. The Legends carried hard in SmackDown vs. Raw. The Legends in Here Comes the Pain were a step in the right direction. SmackDown vs. Raw only followed up. The Rock, Mankind, Legend Kane, and Legend Undertaker, welcoming additions to the game. And this may not seem like a big deal, but Bret Hart returning to a WWE game was huge because it was the first time he did something with WWE since 1997, and it was a step in the right direction. I should also note that he was in WWE Day of Reckoning, but overall, the Legends carried hard here. They had entrance music as well, which was not the case in Here Comes the Pain. So when you look at the roster in SmackDown vs. Raw, it's somewhat disappointing, especially because there was a downgrade. There wasn't as many wrestlers as Here Comes the Pain. And I would say Day of Reckoning, but I'm pretty sure I'm wrong about that one as well. The Creation Suite underwent a lot of significant changes. Create a Wrestler was graphically improved, a lot of more options. It wasn't as significant as the next game though. Solid, but not groundbreaking as Shut Your Mouth or even SVR 2006, which did a whole hell of a lot for Create a Wrestler. Create a Championship was a fresh addition and was as advertised. I never used to play Create a title in SmackDown vs. Raw because I'd seen 07 and 08, so when I got to play SmackDown vs. Raw, it wasn't that appealing to me. The amount of detail for this one was noticed by fans. They wanted to make a bang with a Create a belt in the first year and gave you a lot of options from the jewels to the belt strap color. And it's not a situation like 2K22 where they brought back GM mode and half-assed it, because they actually put in a lot of effort for Create a belt here, and it would only get better. Create a pay-per-view is a nice addition, especially in the era before Universe mode. It gives you the option of up to 8 matches to place on a pay-per-view. They play an intense promo for the main event. Fireworks go off and you go from there. You could even change the commentary team, which was cool. I actually loved that feature as a kid. I don't know why I loved it, but I really liked it a lot. The Creation Suite needed some work, and SmackDown vs. Raw was like hold my beer. It set the stage for the next game to improve on, and they did. Create a belt, Create a Wrestler were much better as the years went on because of the groundwork this game laid out. Another new addition to SmackDown vs. Raw was Challenge Mode. It was similar to the Madden and FIFA challenges, but with a WWE twist to it. I personally used to love these challenges because after beating Season Mode or whatever, it gave you more to do, and the unlockables were fresh. The challenges were definitely challenging as time went on. I didn't search this, but if I remember correctly, there was this hard-ass challenge where you had to beat Legend Undertaker. I don't really guarantee it was, but I seem to remember facing him on Legend Mode or something along the lines of that. Another, I think, involved beating Chris Benoit with the crossface, even a bra and panties one, although that might be SCR 06. But in general, it was fresh, welcoming, and best of all, gave you something else to do. You can grind for a couple of hours and beat a bunch of those challenges. It's something minor that I wish for the games to bring back, but it doesn't look like they will. The presentation is what THQ made a huge deal out of, and in that area, I'd say it's somewhat solid. It's not like SDR 2010, which went all out to try and make it seem like the TV, you know, with the WWE logo on the left. But SmackDown vs. Raw had some stuff to it. Tell the tape before matches. Commentary got a bit repetitive if you play the game often. They're like, oh, one man will come out the loser. Michael Cole's like, there's a reason why I'm not in the ring. The lines, if you hear them, you know what I'm talking about. But there was a lot of problems with this presentation focus. One of them is season mode voiceover, but I'll get to that later. Another is the announcements, because at the time, there wasn't an intro announcement, you know, like when a wrestler comes out, you didn't really hear The Rock, this and that. They brought that here, and it was dull. When The Rock comes out, the announcer sounds like they're reading a paper. They're like, oh, weighing in at 260 pounds, The Rock. It sounds so basic and doesn't reflect the real TV entrances. We're like, oh, The Rock. It wasn't here. And the worst of them all is the fact that when you win, there's no winning animation. It just gives you a rematch or exit option. And this is despite the season mode having the animations for winning or losing. One moment you're talking about presentation, the next you have a cold exit to the match. It was all over the place. It was very inconsistent. And that's very unfortunate because that was the thing they were hyping up the most, I believe. Some of it was good, you know, pre-match stuff, chops, tail of the tape. But then the other stuff like the dry announcements and voiceovers left a lot to be desired. The graphics and likenesses for SmackDown vs. Raw were slightly improved over Here Comes the Pain. It wasn't a huge jump because, as I said, Here Comes the Pain and this game were extremely similar, but a minor improvement. The big guys for the most part looked like each other. John Cena looked like his real life self, The Undertaker, Batista. But then there's others like Randy Orton, who I don't know what the hell he looked like. Rene Dupree looked like fake versions. And I'd say it's still better than Here Comes the Pain though, because the arenas had better lighting to them, more in line with the actual pay-per-views. The lighting is great. I thought the lighting was pretty good for that time period it was in. And the added polygons helped the characters' likenesses a bit, because even though there was some terrible models, the gray ones looked even better than Here Comes the Pain's models. But as always, there's room for improvement, and that's what they did. SVR 06 was even better in the graphics area. And perhaps the most memorable part of SmackDown vs. Raw, season mode. The season mode underwent a significant overhaul with the inclusion of voiceovers. The voiceovers were hyped up by THQ but turned out to be a bit disappointing. Some of them were great, like Vince McMahon went all out to try and make the character look insignificant.
You know, it was my idea to give you this opportunity, and I'd be personally offended if you were to turn it down. You don't deserve that title, damn it. Matter of fact, you don't deserve much of anything. You're a loser, got it? A loser with an overinflated ego. He's got no chance in hell of getting even with Vince McMahon. And I promise, I guarantee that tonight I'm going to give that insubordinate punk the beating of his life in that very ring, my very ring.
But then others like Edge were so dry.
They're so full of themselves that they forgot the first rule of this business. You do whatever it takes to rise to the top.
The Undertaker's voiceovers were hilarious as hell though. Man's out here talking about Trish Stratus, telling Eric Bischoff he needs a favor, and he just sounded so out of character.
Trish, there you are. So can I count on you for some help next week, Mr. Bischoff?
It also caused the season mode to become limited because Here Comes the Pain had a plethora of options, but that's without voiceover. The stories branch, you have a lot of different rivalries. Here, there wasn't that much choices to make. The storylines didn't have much of a layer to them. You lose the title and go on to have the same feud you would have on Raw. So let's talk about the actual stories. Rene Dupree was overpushed as hell. Every once in a while, he would pop back in, even if you were wrestling on Raw. He'd visit, feud with you during Survivor Series or WrestleMania time, I don't remember, but you'd see him a lot. The game developers must have been down bad because for 1/3 of the season mode, you're fighting for a woman. They even had me wrestle a 15-man battle royal to get Stacy Keibler to become my manager. And what about the bra and panties ladder match? I don't know what it is about the character, but he had the woman on lockdown. They just gravitate towards him. Other than the down bad stories, there was a big SmackDown vs. Raw influence. Wrestlers were interfering. Eric Bischoff or Kurt Angle was trying to sign them. And to be honest, some of these storylines were better than those on TV. Eric Bischoff would be calling Kurt Angle on the phone, telling him that he's signing as a wrestler. Then, of course, you have Vince McMahon who's threatening you, telling you, oh, you better get this title shot. You turn it down. You start feuding with him. Then you, of course, end up destroying him inside Hell in a Cell at WrestleMania. So even though the season mode was limited because of voiceovers, it's still very enjoyable and easy to finish. I'll never forget when I bought the game for the first time. I didn't have a memory card, so skipping over and somewhat finishing it in a day was fun. Also, playing the season mode, playing it again, the season mode for the first time in 12 years was very enjoyable and brought me nostalgia from the time I first played the game back in 2008. Overall, SmackDown vs. Raw was a significant change from Here Comes the Pain. The thing is, it's a good game standalone, even if you compare it to Here Comes the Pain, but building upon the success of the previous game, people expected something much better than SmackDown vs. Raw. Gameplay wise, it's good. Sure, something's a bit missing, but it's fun. Climbing up ladders and hitting 5 stars, blasting your opponent with a chair is cool. Nothing outright wrong with the gameplay. It's just THQ's set potential to the game that was gonna be almost impossible to reach. They brought in a lot of things. Online play, which I didn't mention because it's locked for me. Create a pay-per-view, create a title, superstar voiceovers, yet it still wasn't enough. I personally think it came down to the fact that even though a lot of things were added, it felt like things were taken away from the previous game. Personal experience though, this is one of my favorite WWE games ever. I enjoy a whole lot, and I don't care if it's a hot take. I enjoy most of it more than Here Comes the Pain. It's not better as a game, I just prefer it more. Why? I just like the time period more. This is the time period where John Cena turned face, Eddie Guerrero was champion, Randy Orton as the IC champion, and SmackDown vs. Raw represents that time period extremely well. The time spent in this game is ridiculous for me. I bought it 3 or 4 times. Season mode as always was fun. It's been fun since I played it for the first time. And winning the titles at WrestleMania used to have me thinking I accomplished something as a kid. It was a big deal for me. Even the whole Trish Stratus storyline at WrestleMania. I could never say anything bad about this game. Because it's the only game I turned on at 10 a.m. and turned off at 10 p.m. as a kid. This is of course because I didn't have a memory card, but that day was definitely one of my most memorable experiences playing any WWE game. Probably top 3 most memorable experiences for me. The first time I played the game in years, which was almost 2 years ago, a wave of nostalgia came right at me. I was like, damn, this was the game to me. It was where it's at. And it's like I realized no matter what game comes out now, I'm not going to enjoy them like I used to. It doesn't matter if it's as good as Here Comes the Pain. I'm not going to like it as I did as a kid. SmackDown vs. Raw, it was nice going back to play. It will always make me want to go watch something from WWE 2004. It makes me want to stay in that time period a bit. Hell, I even want the next video to be from that era, but who knows if it's going to be. But yeah, as a game, this does not follow up successfully to Here Comes the Pain. And that's what hurt, I feel. I feel like that's what hurt. At the end, it's remembered as a somewhat transitional period for the series because SVR06 came out and it just about rivals Here Comes the Pain in many areas. But as a standalone, look, if you look at this game without Here Comes the Pain, without SVR06, it's very, very good. I really thought it was very good. Gameplay was fun. Season mode was fun. There's a lot of new additions to it as well. For me, it's one of my favorite SmackDown vs. Raw games ever, easily. I spent a lot of time on it. And I always had fun. I always had fun with this game. I preferred it actually to the other games for the most part. It was SVR07 than this. That's how good this game was for me. So yeah. Alright, what you guys think of SmackDown vs. Raw? Please comment down below. And that's the first video. Make sure you hit the FU on the like button or perhaps the RKO on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.